Hey everybody, welcome back to another installment of the Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Severi.
We got a good episode again. You know, Nick, we've been talking about the guests that keep coming on this show. And tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about feminism. And we have author Emma McIlroy, who wrote a kid's book about feminism. You can check out the series at akidsbookabout.com. They're a company based out in Portland that writes these children's books about topics that, you know, a lot of people think are taboo to talk to kids about at an early age. And the topics range the gamut, you know, from systemic racism to divorce, to feminism, which we're going to be talking about tonight, to voting. There's so many different topics that the series covers. They've been featured on Oprah's book club, and we're super excited to have her on the show tonight. And she also started a women's clothing line company called Wildfang. You can check them out at wildfang.com. She formerly worked at Nike. So much with Emma to unpack with her, but really excited to talk about feminism because she wrote this book really to be a conversation starter. And I think that's a great place when we start talking about what some people think is taboo in saying feminism.
Yeah, Emma's book speaks to, and like the other books in that series, about accessibility. How do you take these otherwise concepts that usually at like a dinner party, you know, may get thrown around and, you know, people may get uncomfortable with what they actually know with these concepts. So what does that look like when you try to scale it down to the younger ones, to our daughters, for example? Right. So getting a chance to hear Emma speak on that. I had a chance to take a look at Wildfang's website recently. Their mission's fantastic. Their product line's incredible, but they're very mission-based. And it's going to be exciting to get a chance to talk to Emma today, just to tell us a little more about her organization, what they're all about, their values, and what does that mean to really just, you know, break down gender norms and you know, a lot of things that they speak to on their site.
No, you're right. And it's a great topic for us, you know, because of us raising three girls between us, you know, and just teaching tomorrow's generation, especially females, you know, about equality. So we're really excited to talk to Emma tonight. All right, joining us now is an author from the Kids Book About series. She wrote a kids book about feminism. She's also the CEO of Wildfang, so we're going to ask her about that, and we're super excited to have her on tonight, and that's Emma McIlroy. Emma, Mike Leon, Nick Severi, thanks so much for hopping on with us.
Of course, and thank you so much for getting my name right. No one does that.
Well, I mean, I love Rory, so
it's a rarity when he does. Like he's 0 for 2 on this one. So
you're a golfer? Have I got a golfer?
I'm a huge golfer, single-digit handicap for our audience. I'm going to send that to my friends. But
there we go with this.
I love Rory, and just recently was working at Golf Digest before starting this podcast. So,
all right. Well, I'm also from a big Dolphin family, so you may get to Portland. We'll go swing some clubs.
Oh, perfect. Now I'm going to hashtag this golf so that way it'll get more traction.
Nice.
But I wanted to get into you first as a person before we get into your journey as a writer in your company. But tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're from Ireland, obviously, and tell us how you got started into writing and then linking up with a kids book about series.
Yeah, I'm from Belfast, so I'm from Northern Ireland. So about 5,500 miles from where I'm currently sitting. I grew up there. Amazing country, amazing people. Very lucky to come from where I come from. Also offers a very unique perspective on the world, I think, when you come from Belfast. Left Belfast to go to university, went to Cambridge, did science, rushed to London to make money in banking, decided that was the worst idea I'd ever had in my life. Quit that and went to work on something I loved, which has kind of been my mantra thus far since that point, has only been to work on things I love. So I went into sport. So I worked on the Barclays Premier League. I'm a huge Liverpool fan, basically if it's got a ball, I'm kind of into it. So big Liverpool fan, went to work on the Premier League, learned a lot about marketing. And then Nike snapped me up and I worked in the UK for them. And then they pulled me across the pond and, I did not think I would be in Portland 13 years later, but here I am still in Portlandia. So I quit Nike. You know, if Nike taught me anything, it taught me a lot about the consumer, and it taught me a lot about building brands that people love, brands that make a difference in people's lives, inspire them, push them. And so I figured there was maybe only one chance I would get to do that for myself. And that's when Wildfang, was born. So Wildfang really exists to just reimagine some of the gender rules that hold women back in the world. Some of that is in uniform, some of that's in attitude, some of that's in career and women's rights. But yeah, we're really trying to break down some of the gender barriers and gender norms in society, and have a lot of fun while doing it. So, Jelani's a friend of mine in the startup community in Portland. I'm a huge fan of his, and when he pitched me a kid's book about it, it was real early, nothing had launched. I was one of the first authors, and I said I would be an absolute idiot not to want to be involved in that. I think as we look forward in the US, as we look at Gen Z and the generations coming behind that, we're looking at the most fluid identity of any generation yet, right? So, that comes through in ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity, careers. That generation's going to jump around a lot in careers. And so you have this amazing generation that is shaping a lot of things differently to how my generation did, right? So they grew up through Occupy Wall Street. They grew up through Smear for Smear and Ice Bucket Challenge, and they really believe they can change the world. And so the idea of being able to talk to that generation directly and the youth that are coming through and honestly going to make a bigger impact on the world than my generation did probably. So I couldn't not be involved in that project. And feminism is a topic that's very close to my heart. And on my Wildfang journey, I've learned a ton about it. I probably wasn't a feminist when I started Wildfang. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know if I've ever said that on a podcast, but I've just learned a ton in that space and learned from a ton of smart people. And I think the next generation are really going to shape a number of topics, that being one of them. So I couldn't help but be involved. It was too cool not to.
Emma, what was it like to write a book directed toward children, talking about a matter that often as parents sometimes doesn't come up on our radar in terms of just bringing it down to a younger audience? What was that experience like?
It was super fun. The team at a kids book about and when you're deeply passionate about a topic, it kind of comes naturally to you. So, to reveal behind the curtains how that process works is the author jumps into a room with a bunch of very passionate people and starts ranting about a topic they're very passionate about, and then somehow a book comes out the other end. So that's sort of how it happened for me. But yeah, that team was amazing to work with, and I think often we underestimate what younger people and kids are capable of. Certainly, I see it all around me in startup. We rule people out for a number of reasons. And then, in many cases, we watch them do something really special. So I think we probably underestimate kids a lot of the time. And, that's why it mattered to me. That's why I want to be a part of it.
Emma, we talked about this off air. You're into golf. You worked at Nike. You're a Liverpool fan. You're from across the pond, technically. So all these experiences, I'm curious about some of the influences you had growing up. Anybody that you saw from Ireland or from other parts of the world that you just, I would love to emulate that person and what they're doing?
That's a great question. I always struggle to answer the question around role models, because for me, it's much more about principles. I've never really tried to catch a person or tried to be a person, but I do try to live values out in my life. I think for me, actually, the most interesting component of my youth, sport certainly taught me a lot, and what sport taught me prepared me for being a CEO and a startup. But actually coming from Northern Ireland was really important. Like, for those of you who don't know, Northern Ireland experienced civil war first, and it was a deeply divided community. And we came through that period of time, and I just learned a lot about people and behavior and what people need in order to move forward and to feel hope, and to feel inspired and to create community and connection. And so I actually carry that with me most often. I'm deeply passionate about trying to build bridges, about trying to bring people from different backgrounds together, because frankly, I've seen what happens when they don't come together. So I think growing up, my dad was a big figure in my life, and he was the first guy to throw me into the boys sports team, right? Because why not, if I was good enough? And there was a couple of things that I remember him saying that really stuck with me. One is, for anybody listening, Northern Ireland actually fits inside Rhode Island. So just so we can maintain some perspective here. So he used to say to me, hey, we're an island off an island, because actually we were. And what he really wanted me to do was go and travel and go and see the world, because when you see other parts of the world, you realize maybe the things we fight about aren't worth fighting about. And maybe we have more in common than we realize. So getting out and seeing more people, more backgrounds, more experience was kind of a big part of what was instilled on me because of where I came from.
You mentioned what you carry with you now, and just thinking about the role you serve at Wildfang, both co-founder and CEO. Can you tell us a little more about that organization, the goals you all have, and how is that influenced by your upbringing and the values that you hold to?
Yeah, I think I had a huge amount of privilege in my upbringing. Maybe not, we grew up working class, so maybe not in terms of money, but in terms of just the ideologies that were presented to me as a kid, which is why I love this series, right? It deeply resonates with me for that reason, because so many things. I remember applying for an internship at New Scientist, right? And New Scientist is our equivalent of, Nature in the UK. And it's a really big deal. And no one told me not to do it. Like everyone else in my class was applying to like the local paper or the local accounting. And I said to my dad, hey, this is my favorite magazine. I'm going to go apply to it. And he said, cool, go do that. And then it turned out that they'd never had anyone actually ask for an internship before. So they were like, okay, why not? We've never had anyone ask. Anyway, the point is, like, he never stood in my way. He was always very much like, have a go, have a try, see what happens. And it was very much later in my, I was a big sports kid. I was training really hard. I was competing a lot in a lot of different sports. So I didn't really understand some of the things that young women go through in particular, and some of the stuff that we heap on anyone who identifies as a woman. I didn't really understand that, I was trying to get bigger and bulkier and more muscly, right? I didn't really understand that most people felt fat at high school. Most women felt fat at high school, even when they weren't, or felt pressure to look a certain way, or, dress a certain way, and that really came to me later in life. And none of that made sense to me, right? It didn't make sense that, solely based on your gender, that we would remove certain choices from you, certain career choices, certain wardrobe choices. I just wanted to break that. I wanted to break all of that. And that's what Wildfang's about. You offer a uniform that typically isn't offered to women, right? We call it menswear inspired, but the point is we take what's expected of a woman and we mess with it. We mess with it through uniform. We mess with it through our activism. We've given back over $500,000 since we started, and we support a wide range of charities that really pioneer women's rights and protecting them. We do it through our social platforms and through our voice. So we stand up and speak out on issues that we think are really important to speak out on. So yeah, that's kind of what Wildfang is. We make really great coveralls, if anybody needs a pair of coveralls.
I think I'm in the market for some.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and hopefully a really rad community of people who love each other and support each other.
That's great to hear. Emma, I want to get back onto the kids book, because I was telling you off air, my wife put me onto a kids book about series, and they cover so many different topics, from divorce to feminism to racism, voting. So Nick asked you about, why you wanted to write it, but I kind of want to know more about, like, how difficult is it to write on a subject matter that a lot of people say, we shouldn't be teaching our kids that, or at least not at this age. Like, how was that experience of writing a book about a topic that a lot of people would say is a little taboo? You even touch upon it in the book. You said a lot of people are scared of the F word, of feminism.
Yeah, I got to be honest. That's the stuff that fires me up, right? You put a rule in front of me, and I tend to like to break it. So that was kind of thrilling for me to, it's no fun addressing a topic that has been addressed 100 times. It's really interesting to tackle one that people aren't talking about but should be. So that fired me up, to be honest. Actually, what was really difficult for me is feminism is very intersectional, right? And all that means is there are many viewpoints within it, and I cannot speak on behalf of all of those. And that was actually the greatest weight for me. When Jelani asked me to do it, I said I would be thrilled to do it, but I wanted to do my best to represent as many viewpoints as possible. And that's really difficult, because each person will have a slightly different viewpoint, but that's why I think the books are so cool, because the entire point is it's not supposed to be a college degree in a book. It's supposed to inspire conversation. It's supposed to remove the stigma and fear factor of having that conversation with your kid, right? So my book is just a starting point on feminism. Hopefully, in my ideal world, in a dream scenario, hopefully that kid goes and, works with their parent to go Google a bunch of, famous women who've done rad stuff, right? Hopefully that's not the end of the conversation. So that would be my hope.
You mentioned how, with ensuing generations, more of a likelihood of changing the world, of doing more meaningful things than, say I'm 42, so I fall in that Gen X category, and subsequent generations after. But when you think of that definition of feminism as it appears for you in the book, and we think about subsequent generations, how do you consider that definition perhaps evolving, perhaps being more illuminating to the kids that are coming?
Yeah, it's definitely evolving. It's evolving rapidly, and it's exciting to watch how it's evolving and how it's taking shape. There's been several waves of feminism, and frankly, they haven't always been inclusive. I identify as queer, and in earlier parts of the movement, I would have been kicked out, right? So I think what you're seeing now is a much more inclusive and intersectional movement that includes queer women, trans women, people of color, includes, it just considers diversity around body type and body positivity, around age diversity. And it really recognizes the different experiences of each within that movement, which is so needed and so important. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. What comes next? Who knows, right? And that's the exciting part of it, is that this generation will take it and shape it and make it their own.
I'm interest of full disclosure, Nick and I are both girl dads. I have a little 2-year-old I was telling you off air, and I'm going to show you a photo of her trying to read the book. I think she's got the colors part figured out, maybe not the text, but, and Nick is raising 2 daughters as well. So what advice would you give for today's girl dad in the context of feminism and empowering young females?
It's a really interesting question. Much of it starts by looking inside and thinking about, you kind of have to, again, an old phrase my dad used to use is stand porter at the door of thought, which basically means you have to observe, I guess it's a Buddhist practice, you have to observe your own thoughts and feelings that you have towards your kids, and really think about whether gender has influenced those, right? And that's a very hard thing to do. But in the toys that you buy her, in the games that you give her, in the books that you allowed her to read, in the content you let her watch, would that be any differently if she was your? And I think that's really what feminism is about, is trying to maintain equality. And hopefully we're past the days where, you walk into the Target kids aisle and, all the stoves and dolls are on the girls' side and all the trucks are on the boys' side, right? Hopefully we're past that. But I think as a parent, it's really just about trying to think about each decision, each piece of advice, each toy, each action, each element. Would it be any different? I'll tell you something, a really interesting study I read on the topic. Once people find out the gender of their child right, so it hasn't come out yet, they modulate their tone of voice and the level of force they use to pat the mother's stomach. In other words, if in a classically heterosexual partnership, if the father learns that it's a boy in the womb, they will pat the stomach harder and talk more sternly and in a deeper tone. And if they learn it's a girl, they will talk in a higher tone and pat it more gently. So it starts there. And when you realize that it starts even before they exit the womb, you just got to really think about every decision, every choice. And ultimately, I would just encourage parents everywhere, you guys included, to try and let their kids make as many choices as they can within reason, right? To try and let them direct their own path in terms of what they wear, what they watch, what they play with, because gender is a social construct that we created. And that might be hard for some people to hear, but that's the truth, right? And so there's a lot that's wrapped up in that. So I would just encourage you to try and let them both be who they're going to be, and love them and support them, encourage them for whatever choices they make. And if they want to be a princess, that's great, and let them be the best princess ever. And if they want to go play with boy, trucks and climb trees and play in the boys' soccer team, let them go do that too.
It's funny you mentioned about Target and other retailers about what appears on clothing. I was, when my first job, I was very much aware of that. Seeing, what does it look like in that section of the store, and it's more about these words about be kind and all the, which is great, but the other section was completely very different. Comic book characters, all that stuff. So I used to mix up, t-shirts that Audrey would wear now. Thinking about that from like the larger standpoint, organizationally, thinking about Wildfang, how have you, as a leader with your team, how have you all been able to go about disrupting gender norms as it lives in the workplace, as it affects a workplace culture?
Oh, that's a really deep and interesting question. Well, I think it starts with the fact that the majority of my board and the majority of my team identify as women or non-binary. So that's quite unusual. Most boards of directors, most senior leadership in corporate are typically cis white male, right? So I think just by the very fact that we show up to work every day and do the job that we do, and are surrounded by the people that we're surrounded by, I think that in itself is kind of an achievement and a shaper of our culture. The other thing I really try to do is create, in the charities that we've supported, in the stands that we've taken as a team, right? So we have supported immigration rights and gave a lot of money to races after the last administration. I don't know the more politically correct way to say put kids in cages. So, that was like a big stand for us. Anytime we take a stand on a human rights issue, it comes from our staff. It doesn't matter whether it's on our social media, whether it's in a give back. Someone in our staff feels passionately about it. And that's kind of the point of this intersectionality of how we all look and feel a little bit different, is that it has to come from the collective. Because no one person can own it. So it may be a trans person on my team that feels like they want to speak out on the military ban, as an example. And I'll let them do that because they're going to have a much stronger and better voice than I ever will. Similarly around BIPOC or Black issues, similarly around queer issues. So we just try to, it's a little bit of an organism, right? We try to make sure that whoever is speaking is deeply connected to the topic and the issue and passionate about it.
Emma, it's been a thrill having you on tonight. That part about the womb thing really touched home with me because, we thought for so long, especially my wife and I, we were having our first baby, that it was going to be a boy because our grandfather passed away, just the connections there. Once I found out it was a girl, you're right. Now I'm remembering those times where I'm like, treating it differently. And then once the baby came out, obviously she's my world now. But it's just funny that you mentioned that. And you've opened my eyes to so much tonight. I want to encourage people, go head to akidsbookabout.com. Check out Emma's book, A Kid's Book About Feminism. Check out wildfang.com. Emma, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me. And I hope there's lots of good conversations happening in households all over the country after they read the book. So thank you guys very much.
All right. That was Emma McIlroy. Nick, she was great, man. Go get the book, check out akidsbookabout.com, and you can see Emma's book about feminism that's listed there on their website. It's really a great read if you've got a little one at home and you really want the conversation starter, like she said. Go get that book and get some of the other books in the series. Check out wildfang.com. Nick, what'd you make of Emma overall, man? I just thought she was great.
Just amazing as advertised. We talked at the beginning about how does a book like this, how do you make these concepts more accessible to children? But then at the same time, for her in her, ongoing professional life as a co-founder and CEO over at Wildfang, what does it mean? Like these values that speak to writing a book about feminism for children, what does she bring into the workplace? And organizationally, what does that mean about Wildfang's mission about confronting gender norms? And she does an amazing job of connecting all that together, just like all of our guests, accessible information and a fun dialogue.
No, it was great. And, the thing that she said about that survey, I talked about it on the episode, but the interview with her. It was true. Like I'm thinking back now to when my wife was pregnant and when we found out it was a girl, and just like the lead up to, a majority of time guys tend to think, we want the boy. And then all of a sudden, as you go through the pregnancy and now you're having a girl, that survey is right. Like I could see the way I was changing, almost as if to make it a softer tone. And she's like, it's got to start right there, and like you're subconsciously doing it. You don't realize it. And then the other stuff, about, and you and I talked about this off air, about letting your kids, explore different things. So that way, let them choose, as opposed to a lot of times parents just force, kids into one direction and stuff like that. And I just thought some of it was really fantastic what she was talking about. And I think the book is really digestible too for parents that just want to start that conversation, with their kids about different topics. Go check out akidsbookabout.com. Great company, great mission. Check them out on Instagram. Check out wildfang.com when you have a chance. For our podcast, always check us out. We're everywhere. Google, Stitcher, Apple, Spotify. Nick's pointing down for the YouTube people. Hit subscribe, follow. Check us out on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter at Can We Please Talk Podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
I'm Nick Saveri.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Later.